Welcome everyone to our webinar. I'm Susan Chapman, the Director of Member Services for the Tri-Societies. With me is Ann Jorce, Vice President of ASTA and representing ASTA's Management Skills and Fuse Committees. We're pleased to have you on this second in a new webinar series titled Leadership, Taking It to the Next Level. This series is designed to provide you with useful information and insights into the management and administration roles you may currently be in or are moving towards. The series is a collaboration between ASA, CSSA, SSSA, and ASTA. There's just a few notes before we begin. You're welcome to ask a question via the chat box on the lower right of your screen. There are two options for posting the question or comment: to all audience members or just to the organizer, myself. So be sure to select either option from the drop-down in the chat section. To keep the flow of the webinar, we'll answer questions at the end of the presentations. Then after the webinar, you'll receive a feedback survey. Please take a few minutes to give us your thoughts. This is our inaugural webinar series, so all feedback is welcome and will help us build the program. And now I'll turn it over to Jonathan Shaver with Envision Partners, and he will serve as our moderator today.
Thank you, Susan. Welcome to the second webinar, everyone, in the leadership series, Taking It to the Next Level. My name is Jonathan Shaver from Envision Partners, a talent development company focused on advancing the up-and-coming leaders in the agriculture industry. I've chosen to be an associate member of the American Seed Trade Association and am a member of the Management Skills Committee. The American Seed Trade Association works on behalf of the seed industry to promote the research, development, and movement of quality seed to meet the world's demand for food, feed, fiber, and fuel. Today's webinar is Supervising Former Peers. Today, we're delighted to have two speakers, both from Beck's Hybrids. Dr. Samantha Miller earned her PhD in agronomy from Purdue in 2012. In that process, she discovered a love for teaching rather than performing basic research. She completed the ASA, CSSA, SSSA Congressional Science Fellowship and spent 2 years as a tenure track faculty member at Oklahoma State University before joining Beck's Hybrids in 2015. As advocacy lead, Samantha conducts tours of the facility for prospective customers and school groups, coordinates the intern program, and runs the We Are Beck's social media campaign. Our second speaker today, Dr. Tom Koch, is the breeding manager for Beck's Superior Hybrids in Atlanta, Indiana. In this role, he manages the breeding, conversion, molecular lab, and counter-season efforts for Beck's. Tom was formerly a plant breeder with Ag-Reliant Genetics before he was selected to be the Vice President of Research, resulting in his first experience of supervising former peers. Tom has been active in the industry as a member of ASTA and the National Council of Commercial Plant Breeders. Tom earned his doctorate in plant breeding and plant genetics at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He also received a bachelor's degree in agricultural education and plant biology from The Ohio State University and an MBA from the University of Notre Dame. Tom currently resides in Sheridan, Indiana, with his wife and 3 children. Today, we'll hear two perspectives. Tom will give us a personal perspective from his own career, full of practical wisdom of what worked and maybe what did not work for him. Samantha will then give us a big picture, providing great advice to help individuals like Tom and like us in our current and future role transitions, in which we might find ourselves supervising former peers. We'll have a couple of polls today for you to participate in, and there will be a lot of time at the end for comments and questions. So Samantha, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Shaver. Tom and I are both here. We're excited for today. Before we get too far into our presentation, supervising former peers, first we'd like to know, to whom are we speaking? So if you could see the poll to the right-hand side of your screen, I'd like for you to please respond. Have you been promoted from peer to supervisor? Push A if you've been promoted in the last year, B if you were promoted very recently, C if you hope to be promoted in the next 1 to 3 years, or D if one of your peers was recently promoted to lead your team. Jonathan, I can't see the polls if people are responding now, so if you'll keep me in the loop, that'd be great.
So absolutely, Sam. So we have our results are in here. We have about 20% have been promoted from peer to supervisor in the last 20 years, 20% very recently. A nice even 40% hope to be promoted in the next 3 years. And the remaining 20% is in the position that one of their peers was recently promoted to lead their team.
Fantastic, thank you. So we're going to start with a little review from last month's webinar that included the change curve. This is a concept that we use here in our professional development and education department here at Beck. So I just want to walk through it very briefly. I know many of the attendees also listened to last month's webinar. So this is an idea of how enthusiasm changes within a team and for each individual when there's a new concept that's introduced or any kind of change. Depending on the severity of the shock, the dip that happens in enthusiasm can result in an energy drain, confusion. Then as people come through the shock of that change, they end up with a higher commitment, a higher enthusiasm level. As we consider things that you need to have in mind as a new manager during these change curves, you being announced as a new manager is going to put everyone on your team through this change. So you don't know where your teammates are. Some will be very apparent, some will walk around with their shock on their sleeve, and others maybe haven't disclosed how they feel about this curve. So you need to be aware that some people may be already through that change, they're already on to commitment. Others may be lingering in that low energy area, and it's your job to lead them through it. Keep in mind that you can't skip the dip. Everyone on some level is going to have some kind of confusion. They want to know, how does this change affect me, and how is it going to impact my future career? So it's your job as the manager then to lead the team through it. The best ways to lead your team through it are to be consistent and to be positive. You need open communication, and you need to make sure that the entire team sees the vision of where we're going to be when we get through the change curve. Today in the webinar, we'll be talking about tips for leading different reactions from your team. First, we'll talk about story time with Tom. I'll let Tom tell you a little bit about his experience.
All right, thank you, Samantha. Appreciate the opportunity to be able to share some stories with you. These are stories, real life stories. I thought about looking into case studies, and I realized the case study I know best is my own. So therefore, I might as well tell you a little bit about my background, how I got to where I am, and some of the missteps I made and some of the learnings I had along the way. So to start off, just to kind of tell you a little bit about how I rose to be able to lead some of my peers. My career actually started as a corn breeder in Champaign, Illinois. I was there for about 5 years, and in this position, I was lucky enough to have some early successes by building on some of the successes already with the team that was in place. This was nice because I was able to very quickly show some technical, have something to hang my hat on, some technical success, which also led into being able to be noticed by some of the managers of the company, which led to some promotions. At the same time, I was also given a little bit of training on how to manage peers and lead others, but it was very minimal. A lot of what I did, a lot of the learnings I had were learning as I went. I had to try and find my own methods to learn, and also just trying to learn as I went and make some mistakes and learn from them. So with that position, I was a corn breeder for about 5 years, and then I also added a second role. This was my first promotion in the company, where I was able to be the breeding technology lead while also still doing some breeding. In this role, I wasn't exactly leading my peers, but I was serving as a service group to my peers. So it was already the start of a transition away from just being one of the breeders and one of the breeding team to actually being in a more managerial role. It was an interesting position. I moved into a technology role. My training was 100% in breeding, and in this position, I actually had to move into more of the molecular breeding type of role, as well as GM conversion. A little bit out of my element, but I was excited to try and take on the new challenge. But with that, I also started to learn a little bit more about managing people. In this role, for instance, I had a biostatistician who was very, very talented, And one of my first professional mistakes in this position was actually, I felt like because it was a position where I didn't know as much as I should have known to have the role I felt like I still had to show that I was in charge, that I knew the direction the team needed to go, and I tried to dominate the direction of how the projects were going, instead of letting the biostatistician and others have their own leeway to be able to do what they felt they needed to do and be able to showcase their creative talent. Thought I was doing the right thing at the time, in hindsight, and realized that I probably was actually stifling the creativity of the team, not necessarily allowing them to shine, not necessarily allowing them to make me look good by them looking good. Turned out to be okay. We were able to work it out and have a workable relationship. And that person, the biostatistician I was working with, he actually went on to be a breeder overseas, and a very successful breeder. But I think part of the reason he left was because of our interaction. And while it worked out, I think it could have been much, much better, and we could have had a much more success as a team if I'd have actually learned a little sooner or given the team the leeway that they needed. I'll talk a little bit more on that in some of the practical wisdom that I share, but that was where I started to do some of my first learnings as a manager. But with that position, I was able to very quickly move into actually a role that, as the head of research for AgriLion in North America, a role I served in for about 6 years. Position I was able to climb into, I thought, fairly quickly. Wasn't convinced that I was ready for this position, but I remember having a dinner with one of the members of the board at a small restaurant in Germany, and I asked him specifically, I said, I think you're setting me up for this position. I'm not sure I'm ready. What do you think? And his exact words still stick to me to this day. He said, doors sometimes open, they seldom open twice. So whether I wanted the position, whether I was ready for the position or not, if I wanted the position, I had to take it now. If I waited till I was ready, I might not have gotten the position. So I felt like I should take the position. I took the position and decided to learn as I went. And learning, I certainly did. And I think I had some successes. I hope I had some successes. And I'll share some of that, but also had quite a bit of learning that I went through as I worked through this. And then about a year ago, I made a company change. That's how I wound up at Beck's Hybrids. After about 5 or 6 years as leading the research team, felt like it was time for some new challenges to try and get, I was about 10 years into my career, 10, 12 years. Thought it was time to either decide to stay, decide to leave. I thought I might go try a different company just to get a different flavor, see how different companies work, to be able to build on some of my professional experience, and also just to try and see what I had already learned, apply it somewhere else, but also learn new things. Change made about a year ago, and change I've been very happy with. Still very close with former colleagues, but also love working with colleagues such as Samantha now. So that's my story. Now to get into some practical wisdom. Some things that I learned, I'm just going to kind of ramble a little bit, share some things that worked well for me, some things that I learned, and some things that I wish I would have done differently. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but just thought I would start out by giving some practical thought, and then Samantha will close up afterward with some more of the academic side of things. The professor and her will come out and teach the actual official reasoning behind everything. But this is just a mid-career plant breeder just talking about some of the thoughts that I've had in the cornfields. One of the first things, practical wisdom I'd like to share, is something that I think has to happen very quickly if you're looking to be promoted or you're hoping to be promoted. It's not critical, but it certainly helps out that you have something on which to hang your hat. This means that you've had something to prove your professional ability. And that shows that you can actually do the job, and your peers will actually give you more respect. I was lucky enough that I was very quickly, as a breeder, able to have a few corn lines that were patented and actually went commercial. Part of that was due to the success of the team that I stepped into. Part of it, I hope, was due to my own creativity and effort. But that allowed me to actually have some technical merit, to something to hang my hat on when I went to lead the team of my peers and the other breeders. Of course, that was as a breeder. As a salesman, it could be units of sales. It could be maybe you led a giant project. Maybe you had an event that you put together and that you led with great success. Something at which that you can actually have demonstrated your technical merit. And with that, it's also important as a way, I guess, even to be recognized by those above you. Often I get asked, how do I make myself known in the company? I would like to be promoted. I want to be in management. How do I get there? And I think this is a very good first step to show that you can do that. And then a second thing, I guess a second thought that I often have is with this, when I was thinking through it, when you think about your former peers, something you have to remember, no matter what promotion you have, your former peers, which are now your current direct reports, it's important that you still stay friends. If they were friends before, they can still be friends now. Too often I hear managers say I could no longer be friends because they were now my employees, they were now my direct reports. I have never been in a position successfully where I have not been friends with my manager, where I've not been friends with those that report to me. I find it's very helpful to be friends. We're all in it together. It's really important that we connect together and we're invested in each other's success. With this, though, one caution is that it is impossible to separate home from work. Sometimes people like to say that I have my work life and I have my home life. To some extent, I think that can happen, but for me personally, I don't work under those conditions. I can't separate work from home entirely. I do have some separation of both. For instance, Facebook I use for my home life, LinkedIn I use for my work life. I don't necessarily mix the two. I know some people that do. It's great if they do, and that works well. But with this, the dynamic has certainly changed, and that can be witnessed with this work-home separation somewhat. For instance, before when I'd go out with peers, when I'd go out with coworkers, maybe I'd go out for dinner at a company event, or when we're out traveling for meetings or winter nurseries, I might be out with the entire team all night. We'd have dinner, we'd have a good time. Well, now if I'm the supervisor, still have that friendship, but maybe I leave a little bit earlier. Maybe I only stay for 1 or 2 drinks and let them have their night. Let them have their time without the boss. Still important to have a connection, but still important to show that they can have their time without the boss, that they can talk about me if they need to, they can let out steam, whatever it might be, as I'm sure I've given them plenty of reason to talk about me. And I prefer them to be able to get it off their chest if they need to with each other. It works well. One thing that this does address is actually a point that was made at the original flyer. Why many of you probably signed up for this was, how does this change your relationship outside of work? So trying to direct. We have a few of these boxes that Samantha and I will have periodically popping up where we're actually directly trying to answer some of the questions that came up in the initial flyer. And a third point, I guess now. Do not demand or command, rather let the peers feel like it's one of their own team that leads. I've seen people that I've promoted step into roles. I hope I didn't do this. Perhaps I did. I guess I somewhat did with the biostatistics example I gave. But too often I've seen managers, when they fail, it's often that they step into a new role and they try and demand or command, try and take charge and lead. Some situations call for that, but most situations, it's better if it's still part of the team. Especially if you're promoted from your peers, you're still one of their peers in some ways. And if you let them feel like one of their team now leads, they still feel like it's the team and there'll be a better vested interest in it. I know it's human nature often to try and say that I'm in charge, I lead this now. Probably better to resist that if you can and let the whole team work together. And because if you let them work well, they're going to make you look good. And with that leads to the fourth point, you're only as good as your team. You have to rely on your former peers. They are the ones that are going to make you look good. They are the ones that are going to make you look bad. They're the ones that are going to determine the success of you and your team in reality. I got promoted to leading a team of breeders. With that, I was no longer breeding lines. I'm judged on how well my commercial program is, how well my commercial lines are. But if I'm not breeding lines directly, I have to rely on the success of my team. And that's my role here at Beck. I lead a breeding team. I'm only as good as they are directly, because if they are not producing commercial inbreds, then my output is zero. But I have very little direct control over that. That's rather how I lead them and how I push them forward. So it's really important to rely on them and make them feel like a part of the team and really push them forward. Because not only are you as good as your team, there's a good chance your successor is part of that team. And there'll be people that would like to move into your type of role, and will probably be interested in seeing how you do it, and we'll learn from that and probably follow in suit. Some other practical wisdom points, just a few more here before I pass it on back to Samantha. Continual learning is a must. This is maybe a cliche that's often overused, but I think it's very important and very valid, that it's not just learning can never stop. And by learning such as this webinar or this whole webinar series, I think is a great way to do this continual learning. But with this learning, I'm talking not only just the theoretical nature, that's important, but also experiential. Actually getting out and learning by getting your hands dirty, actually experiencing it, being willing to make mistakes. Get out there and actually do it. I think that's really critical. Books can help. My bookshelf is full of books, most of them unread, but I have every intention of one day reading them, probably well after they'll actually do me any good, but I intend to read them one day. But I think this is where the FFA member in me comes forward. I just love the learning by doing aspect. I think that is absolutely critical to being a successful manager. You know, and with that, when I stepped into the role as being the head of the whole breeding team, I had to learn by doing. I now went from managing a small territory in central Illinois to having a territory now where I was not only managing the people, but also the product lineup and what was coming forward from Pennsylvania to Kansas, from Tennessee, I guess even down in the Delta, up to Manitoba. I had to get out and get my hands dirty. I had to learn a lot new, not only working with people, but also different types of people, different cultures. It's amazing as you go across the Midwest how the cultures change and how management culture even changes. Because not only was I managing other breeders, I was also involved with the management of their teams. And how you might manage a team in Minnesota is going to be very different than how you manage a team in Tennessee or how you might manage a team in Kansas. It's just, there's a lot of human nature that comes out and just a lot of the different upbringing. And it was exciting and fun. I really loved getting out, meeting the different people, but also learning how to work with them. That continual learning still occurs to this day. A year ago when I switched to a different company, I mean, a completely different culture. You know, I moved from one mid-sized corn company to one mid-sized corn company. So I thought, should be easy, no problem. It's just pick up one day and start in the next one. That quickly changed the first week. First day I met Samantha, and she definitely showed me it was going to be a different road over here at Beck's, and I've been enjoying it, but it's been experiential, not just the theoretical nature to make it happen. To help you get through that, mentors or sounding boards can be really extremely helpful. Almost, I'd say, I mean, they're very invaluable, almost have a direct result in your success. And with that, I think it's important not only to have those internal to the company, but also external. There are some people inside the company that are going to be very interested in making sure you succeed and your team succeeds. Yes, there may be some that would have liked to have had your job. Maybe there will be some that wish somebody else had the job. Probably not the best mentor to have, but there'll be somebody that wanted you to have the job that you have, probably even rooted for you. And actually, that's probably the best place to start with your first mentor, is the person who chose you. Somebody, you weren't just chosen out of a hat. You weren't just chosen at random to lead. You did something. Somebody saw something in you that will help you. They felt like you would help the company, would be very important to the company and the people to help lead. That's a great person if you can find out who that was, who was the person pushing for you. A great person to start as a mentor, because that person is going to be directly vested in your success. For me, that was one of the breeding managers from one of our European parent companies in Germany. I'd only meet him maybe 4 or 5 times a year, but often call him, talk with him all hours of the day. We had many calls where after he put his kids to bed at 8, 9 o'clock at night, which was end of the day here for me in the US. Great, I got to hear it from a different perspective, but I also got to hear from his problems, because he had a similar situation where he went from being a breeder in France to leading an entire global breeding network. He had made many of the mistakes that I was trying to make. He stopped me from making some of them. Some of them I made well before he was able to stop me, but we both learned from those. And I think it was a great success by having not only a friend, but also a mentor in his position. I think with that, you'll make some mistakes. This is probably the most important lesson that I learned. I went into this thinking, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it right. I was chosen. There's a reason I was chosen. They know that I know how to do this. I will do this perfectly, because otherwise I would not have been chosen to do this. Usually it takes about half of the day to realize that is completely wrong. You're going to make mistakes. Try not to make the big ones, but if you do, it happens. You just roll with it. Sometimes you just don't let them define you. The general manager for GE, the famous CEO for GE. No, not.
Sorry.
That was Chrysler. From GE.
Jack Welch.
Jack Welch. Sorry, my names are mixing up here. Listened to a podcast last week from Jack Welch, and he was talking about how he made a huge mistake. He literally blew the roof off of one of his factories. Literally blew it off. And shortly later was chosen to be CEO. because they said it was how he rolled with it. He didn't let it define you, and literally how he rolled with it. You're going to make those mistakes. Let them happen. I even got to the point I was actually pre-scheduling meetings with HR, knowing I was probably going to do something, and I wanted just confirmation that what I did was not the absolute worst way to do it, but also to sort of debrief, and this is how I did it. Well, first off, did I do it right and legal, which I think I did it. I hope I did it legal every time. But just to get their input and their advice from the HR perspective, because they work with people, they work with them often, and they know what's going on. I think that was absolutely critical to that success. And one other thing that I did, and I really didn't know how to put it in here, often I get asked, as a plant breeder, you've got your PhD, why did you go get an MBA? And I've talked to a few other plant breeders that have gotten their MBA because it doesn't necessarily fit in right. I actually got my MBA after I had taken the role of leading peers. And the reason I went back to get it was because as I was doing all of these things, learning all of these things with this practical wisdom, making my mistakes, learning things, I realized that I also needed to be able to communicate externally and be able to be the spokesman for my team. Sitting in my first board meeting and realized there's not many people around the table that know research. I can either teach everyone there how to speak research, or I can teach everyone there or I can learn myself how to speak business. So I went and got my MBA to learn how to speak business, and in the process also learned a lot of the theory behind what I was doing right, where I missed the mark on some of the theory, and a lot of what Samantha's going to talk about was what I had to learn and had to go out and learn through my MBA. But your probably main role as a manager is to select the person that's going to come after you, or to help train the person that's going to come after you. Selecting others for promotion, your former peers, they're looking to you for the future of their career. And one of your primary jobs is to figure out which one of them could replace you, but also which one of them is going to be on your kitchen cabinet, if you will, your internal advising board, and move up in the company and actually help train them to be able to take higher roles inside that company. How do you invest in your team? How do you trust your people? Learning how to trust people and provide intentional training. When I became the head of research, I had a team of 4 people underneath me that were all my directors, and of them, one was from an external, brought in somebody with some industry experience, but the other 3 were all peers that I had actually worked with. 2 of them I'd actually worked directly with, one I had hired as a breeder, saw the potential they had, promoted them, and realized that they had a lot of success. They had a lot of potential to make me look good, but also that they were people that I could trust and get along with. And I wanted to make sure I had people that knew the organization, knew the culture, knew the people, and that they could lead. And I'd have to help, even though I'd have to help train them how to manage their peers. When you start leading your peers, there are some tough times, but you just have to realize that you're not the only one. If you look at the poll results from earlier, there's quite a few of us on this call who are in a position of leading former peers, or would like to be in a position of leading former peers. And it's something that we all go through at some point, often multiple times in our career. So I think it's important to help those around you and let them help you as well, because having a capable team only makes you look better. So that's my last slide. Before I turn it back to Samantha, maybe just a quick few last words. It's important, as I said, to be continually motivated, especially at self-motivated learning, whether you're going out and doing webinars such as this or something as intensive as getting an MBA. It's important to have that continual learning. And you are a leader, and you're going to be, if you're promoted to lead the team, you're not only just a leader, but you are still a team member. You're still going to be part of the team, answering to many of the rules of the team, and your success is 100% dependent on that team. And you're going to make mistakes. They're going to happen. Just don't let them define you. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Just move on and try and learn from them. And as long as you don't repeat the mistake, even if you blow the roof off of the factory, you can still become CEO one day. So my experience is that it can be difficult to manage people, especially when they're former peers. Some people are going to be very easy, and some people will be difficult because they probably wanted your job. But overall, once you get past some of the little intricacies, it's very rewarding. And it was great. And if when it comes down to it, if you don't accept the position to start leading your peers, it's probably going to be one of your peers leading you. So you're going to be on one side of this or the other. You just have to decide if you'd rather lead your peers or have one of them lead you. So with that, I will turn it over to Samantha.
Thanks, Tom. So the first thing, when you've been selected as a manager, it's not uncommon at all to suffer from what a lot of pop culture calls imposter syndrome. You feel exactly like what you just said, that this must have been a mistake. They don't realize that I'm not qualified for this position. You start to doubt yourself and erode at your own self-confidence. Your team will pick up on that. You need to trust the process. You need to know that your promotion was intentional. This is not an accident. A team of management from the company or institution at which you spent your time has chosen to invest in you and to build your career. So find confidence in that. Understand the why. If you feel like you don't understand why you were chosen, or you feel that you need more reassurance, meet with the hiring committee. Just like what Tom said, when identifying mentors, that hiring committee has already invested in you, and the better you look, the better they look. They want you to succeed. Trust the leadership of the organization. Trust that they have a long-term plan for you, for your career, and for your team. But be very engaged in that process. Speak with them. Allow them to quite explicitly explain why they chose to invest in you, and that way you're armed with that information as you go forward. As you are introduced as a new supervisor to your team, you'll get a variety of responses. I will call them the cheerleaders, those who are neutral, and those who are opposed. So let's talk about the why. Oh, I think my poll is on. Oh, I'm missing my slides. Okay, that's fine. So the cheerleaders are, they love you. They lobbied to get you the job. This is the outcome that they wanted. Those cheerleaders are excited. They already feel like they won something when you were announced as the manager for that role. For those who are neutral, they're okay with you. They just want to do their job. They didn't really want your job. They're probably okay in the role that they're in. Maybe they're not ambitious to lead other people. They maybe just want to tend to their own house. And then those that are opposed. Those that are opposed are a special class. They get a lot more attention than the others because they're going to require more strategic management. They don't support you in this new role. They may have applied for this job themselves. They may have been extremely loyal to your former boss, and even if your former boss is no longer with the company and not affiliated with your team at all, their loyalty to the past may cloud their vision of your future with the company. Maybe they don't trust you. Maybe they don't trust management. They may be typically skeptical of everything that goes into planning an organization. This is not the outcome that they wanted. If they're in that opposed group, they already feel like they lost something, okay? They're going to have a bit of an axe to grind. So it's up to you to lead them through that. So here's my poll. To whom are we speaking? How did you respond when your peer was promoted to be your leader? Were you A, a cheerleader? You were excited and supportive? Were you B, neutral, maybe cautiously optimistic, but didn't feel like it impacted you very much? Or C, were you opposed? You wanted that job. You would have been better at it than them, or you at least knew someone who would have been better at it than them. So I see that Susan has opened up the poll. Dr. Shaver, I'll give it a few minutes, or a few seconds. Just give me the readout when you've got your response.
All right, I'm here. Just about half the people have voted, are coming in fast, but it is very consistently that most people were cautiously optimistic. About 60% of the people are showing that. Just over 10% are in that category of wanting the job, and 30% excited and supportive of their new leader.
We have 10% of the people that are fully honest.
That's what I was about to say. That 10% of people who are fully aware, self-aware, we appreciate that. Those of you who are cautiously optimistic, I challenge you to be a little bit more invested in the leadership in your department. But I understand it. Sometimes you feel like maybe that's just above your pay grade and maybe it's not your day-to-day concern. We're going to talk through, as a leader, how would you respond to each of these? So the cheerleaders. This is our 30% that's on the call that was very excited to see a peer promoted. You know, as a manager, when you approach the cheerleaders, you love them back. You appreciate their support. You're going to need them. It's good to have people on your team who are rooting for you already before you've even hit the ground. I would caution you, do not drink their Kool-Aid, okay? So there are people on your team who are not cheerleaders, so please don't get a myopic vision where you say, well, Sally really likes me, right? I'm okay, leader, because Sally likes me. Well, your team is comprised of more than one. So just be a little bit cautious there. You may ask them the why of their support. I may say, Tom, why do you see me as a good leader in this role? What about my application made you cast your lot with me? That's also going to build up your confidence as a leadership. And it's also going to reinforce your own perception of how your team sees you. They may have seen something in you that you're not aware of, that you haven't built up or strengthened in your own portfolio. So when you approach these cheerleaders and you're working on managing them, you're going to build their careers, develop their skills, be sure that you've built a new relationship with them about being their manager. You're going to invest in them. Now, those who are neutral, this is 60% of the folks on the call. As your manager, invest in those people. They're neutral to you because they don't know what you can do for them. They maybe don't have a good relationship with you or a relationship at all. So it's up to the leader to build a personal relationship with that person. Build their careers. Let them know that you're interested in their long-term success, that you have a vision, that you're going to empower them to grow in their role professionally and grow with the company. Eventually, these neutral individuals will start to see you as an advocate and then a coach. They're going to become very loyal and probably move down the spectrum up into that cheerleader category eventually, even if they're not always quite as enthusiastic as Sally. Now, those that are opposed, sometimes it's appropriate to acknowledge it. Sometimes it's appropriate to say, Tom, I know I wasn't your first choice. That takes a lot of venom out of their argument because you've acknowledged it. It's not a secret. It's not something they're being stealthy about. As a leader, you then support them. You build their careers just like everyone else. You have to forge a new relationship with this person because maybe they didn't have a good relationship with you as a peer. Maybe they saw you as competition. And as you tell them, Tom, I want you to be successful. Tom, this is the arc I see for your career. These are the things that I'm going to help you to accomplish. And you're going to have something to hang your hat on, right? As they start to see that you're willing to go to bat for them, they'll start to trust you. But you've got to give it time. This is not going to be immediate. I'm going to throw a ton of cliches at you guys during this webinar, but Rome wasn't built in a day. You've got to forge a new relationship. However, do not tolerate toxic behavior on the team. So there is a line. You are the manager, and it's your job to shepherd the culture of your team. You cannot handle having someone who is diametrically opposed to your leadership, who undermines your authority, who questions you at every turn. I'm not saying that there's no room for healthy debate. That's not a toxic relationship. A toxic relationship would be someone who undermines you to the rest of the team. Your team is going to be moving among these categories. As you build your relationship with them, as time passes, you maybe need to check in and say, where are these people? Are they supportive of my leadership? Do I need to invest a little more in them? How am I doing? The first step when you're a new leader is to build your plans and share your vision. Your team doesn't know your style, your priorities, your intentions. They may know you as a peer, but that doesn't mean that they have heard where you want to take your team or where you want to take your department, your company. Just tell them. you can flat out tell them. And this can take a lot of different roles. So this doesn't have to be a formal speech with a PowerPoint. This could be a meeting. If you're a very diffuse team that's spread across geography, this could be a teleconference. This could be an email. But it doesn't hurt for you to explicitly lay out what your goals are. Now, when it comes to developing one's goals, those may or may not be originated at your desk. You may have been hired to turn around a team. Your company may have invested in you as a leader, hopeful that you can make a change or a strategic initiative or lead a new process. So some of this is going to come from you, and some of this may come from your own management. So strategies to tell them. Be clear and intentional with any administrative changes. You are going to be moving someone's cheese by virtue of being their new manager. So are you adding or ending a meeting? Why are you adding or ending this meeting? Why are you pulling them away from their normal routine? Did you change something as mundane as an expense report? Is it going to affect their lives? A lot of your teammates, and 60% of you guys were skeptical or neutral, right? Your biggest problem when you get a new manager is you want to know, will the coffee still be free, right? Why are you doing this to me? How is this going to affect my life between 7:30 a.m. and 5 p.m.? So anything that you change as a manager, and you do have the authority to make some of these changes, but if you're going to change something, you need to justify that, be very clear about the why and your vision for what will come out of this change. Don't allow the team to think that you're changing things just to put your stamp on the department. One way that you can do this is to establish a rallying cry. And so this is something that came out of a book that we've read here at Beck. A rallying cry is not a half-page mission statement. It does not have buzzwords in it. It is not something that you're going to put up on the company website. A rallying cry is a unifying force that your whole team can then nucleate around. So if you come into a team that has been known to undermine each other and doesn't have a great teamwork, and maybe it's a little toxic in there, your rallying cry might be, we are one team. You're going to work that in. You're going to talk about, we are one team. I'm not competing with you, Tom. We're one team. You might come into a team that's relatively stagnant and hasn't seen a lot of innovation lately. Maybe your rallying cry becomes, innovate today. What am I going to change? Innovate today. These are going to be short. They're brief. They're something that you probably want investment of the team to develop that rallying cry. How are we going to change how our team is perceived in the rest of the company? How are we going to change what we've been doing, and why are we changing it? This is something that we did last year on my team in education, writing a user's manual. So the folks that you're managing know you as a peer. They have some relationship with you, and they maybe know a few of your professional preferences. But sometimes if you do something as explicit as writing a user's manual, you can communicate very quickly with the rest of the team. Your user manual might say, if my door is closed, I'm in editing mode. Please don't open it. Your user manual might say, if you email me after 4 p.m., expect a response before 10 a.m. the next day. Or I don't check my work email on Sundays. Or whatever your personal limitations are. Maybe you are you think a voicemail is anathema to modern civilization. Please do not leave me a voicemail. I would prefer 10,000 text messages. That's the kind of thing that can relieve a lot of stress right away if you just explicitly tell your team, right? Hi, I'm going to be leading the team. I prefer you to communicate with me this way, and this is why. So this kind of feeds into that overarching question for the webinar, which was, how will we operate? When we agree, when we disagree, what are our standard operating procedures as a team? A few best practices. You as a new manager are building a new relationship with each individual. A lot of these new relationships are built upon the foundation of the relationship you had when you were a peer. but it's a new kind of relationship and it's a new page, especially with number 3, those people who are very opposed to you. You need to forge a new relationship with them. One of the fastest ways for someone to trust you is to show vulnerability. So tell them, I need your help. I will not be successful in this role if you don't support me. Tell them, I don't know how to do your job, Tom. I need you on my team. I'm excited that you're on my team. Tell them, hey, Tom, I know we haven't gotten along for the last 2 years. You're still mad at me because I ran over your dog. I'm really sorry about that, right? So show a little vulnerability and some humility when you approach folks who are opposed to you, and that will help to move them up a little farther into that neutral maybe. You probably won't make a cheerleader out of them tomorrow, but they'll start to respect you on a new level. So this goes into, how do I appear to be a fair team leader? Well, the best way to appear to be a fair team leader is to actually be a fair team leader. And how do I ensure that I am being fair? Well, that's where your mentor comes in. That's where your sounding board, and that's where a lot of gut checks with yourself. You need to be self-aware. Why did I make that decision? Why did I choose that person to lead that project? Was it because they were a cheerleader, or was it because it was the best person? Because if you're choosing someone to lead a project or an initiative and it's just for your own ego, you're not being a fair team leader. And so you are responsible for making that evaluation. Welcome to management. So how do I go about building these relationships? A lot of face time, a lot of investment. Do not go away. Do not give up on them. I'm not saying pester them, but on our team, we do weekly one-on-one meetings. My boss told me she considers the year 52 one-week sprints. So if she wants to meet with me before the race, I'd let her know. If I'm going to be booked all week and I really can't answer emails, or I'm going to be out of the office, or maybe I have a couple of days that are a little bit light, maybe I can help take something off another teammate's plate. Checking in with her weekly helps her to keep us organized, helps us to keep everything moving on the same page. In a sales role, this could be ride-along. We had a person here at Beck who is promoted from one department into managing sales. He'd been involved with sales for a long time. He spent 6 months, his first 6 months as sales manager, doing ride-alongs, getting to know the team. Just like what Tom said when he was managing folks from Minnesota to Tennessee, you get to know what's the regional culture, what are the needs of folks in this area, what do they need from me as a manager, how can I meet them where they are. So FaceTime is simple if you all work in one building. If you don't all work in one building, this becomes a weekly phone call. This becomes some form of regular, scheduled, intentional communication from which you build this new relationship. You may want to tell your story. So your peers probably haven't seen your CV. They might not know your experience. So to use an example from Tom, when you go from being a breeder to technology lead, your team might not know if you have a background in biostats or not. And it may be that you have a strong background and there are qualifications that make you quite qualified to lead that team, but your team may not just be aware of them. So this is your opportunity. You're new to the team, share your story. As you're sharing your story, set your priorities. Is your number one priority output? Is your number one priority cohesion, efficiency, speed, innovation, creativity? What are you hoping the rest of the company says, when I think about any team that Tom's involved with, I know they have output, or I know they're very efficient, or I know they have each other's back, right? They get it done. So set a priority for what your team is. And please, please find a mentor. This is especially important if you've never managed. You will have very regular conversations that you didn't see coming. You'll be in situations you've never been in before. It's absolutely crucial. We do here at Beck, we kind of have Beck's book club, so we love to recommend reading around here. These are 2 books that have gone around Beck's the last year or 2, Extreme Ownership and 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I'm not going to go through them here. However, if you're seeking more professional development above and beyond, things like this webinar are a great start to get you thinking deeply about your own professional career. But these 2 books would be a great place to go. Okay, in summary, it's important for every new leader to understand the why. Have faith in your own accomplishments. It's not an indictment of your ego to be confident that you will be successful. Navigate the reactions of others, and I use the word navigate instead of, you know, manage or something like that. They're going to be changing. These are going to be people going through an emotional response, and it's your goal to remain positive, remain optimistic, remain consistent, and bring them through those reactions with you to the top end of that change curve. Build your plan and share your vision so that everyone knows where you're headed. You have a clear destination in sight. And of course, give it some time. This is not going to be immediate, and one wouldn't expect it to be. So that's what we have from here at Beck. Dr. Shaver, do you have questions for us?
Yes, I do. So thank you, Tom. Thank you, Samantha, for your experience and your perspective. I think from the poll responses at the beginning that you've provided our listeners with just the right insight that they can use. So now we do have time for our participants to ask questions. I see that they're already coming in. I was just a little slow as I'm starting to read them already. So if you will, I'll ask our participants to type your questions in the question box at the bottom of your window there. You'll see the arrow for questions, or you can put them in the chat box and make them visible to everyone so that I can see what those are. Okay. So I'll pick some questions that seem to be the most common. So here comes our first one. What about, okay, so what is challenging or helpful of leading former peers that are older or more experienced than you? So it's a very specific situation. Not if they have quite a bit more experience than you.
Good. That means you have a great team that you're leading, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not responsible for doing everyone's work because you're the leader. And so you don't have to have the technical skills that each individual on your team has.
But you may have to give them some space. Clearly they've been doing the type of role they're in for many years. They have a wealth of knowledge, both institutional knowledge and even just practical knowledge. I had issues with this, where I think I handled some things well and some things not well, where the person had a lot of experience. Sometimes you want to change what they're doing. You have to maybe make that change a little slower, help them realize that that change is in their best interest as well. And sometimes they just know better than you, and you have to give them credit. Hey, I know I wouldn't have done it that way. You got a really good idea there. You've got good experience. I'm going to defer to you on this one and let them have the ownership of it. I think that's what they're looking for is be able to have the space, but sometimes when changes need to be made, it helps if you can have a very solid understanding and convincing argument on why that change needs to be made.
They're going to need a lot more why than a less experienced employee.
Absolutely. And sometimes that person will be stuck as Samantha's number 3 and will not support you. And if that's the case, you just have to figure that's the case. That is, just be able to know that is what is going to happen. And as she said, not tolerate toxic behavior. Try and pull away from the toxic behavior, but certainly not tolerate it.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's really great. Here's another one that's rather specific, but on the other side of the equation. So I happen to be in, this is what the questioner is writing, I happen to be in the category of someone was promoted over me. A peer was. How should I react if my peer is promoted over me if I don't agree that they have the appropriate technical competence or have
With
something to hang their hat on?
Gracefully as you can muster.
I think if you can look at it from the outside, take a step back, try and think about why they were promoted. Maybe you don't directly see, or you think you have a better idea or you could probably have better management style, or you understand the issue better. But if you take a step back, there might be something that they have some technical merit in, they have some experience that the team actually needs. If you can take a step back, look at it that way. It doesn't hurt to go to the committee that says, you know, whoever promoted the person, it doesn't hurt to call them up and say, hey, I need a few minutes of your time. Look, why was that person promoted over me? Anybody on that committee is going to be very happy to tell you, and usually tell you honestly, this is the reason. And I think it can be a very a nice growth experience that the next time it happens, you understand why.
And this is a very non-academic answer to this, but sometimes it's not about your technical skills.
Yeah.
You can have excellent technical skills, you know, beyond reproach in your field. However, in a manager, we're not looking for someone to execute on technical skills. We're looking for someone to lead and motivate a team. And that may be a separate person. And so please don't see the fact that you weren't promoted as an indictment of your technical prowess.
Or the opposite, that person was promoted because they have the technical need that was seen as being the need on that team, even though they may not have the managerial style that you wish they had.
Okay, so look elsewhere of what they're hanging their hat on, if you will, or what.
There's a reason that person was promoted, and if you can figure it out, it will go a long way to helping accept why that person was promoted.
Fantastic, yes. So Tom, just here's a question about tying the two together. The responses from your team when you were promoted to vice president, what kind of distribution did you see? Did you see cheerleaders and those people that were opposed?
I'd say overall it was probably a bell curve. I think a lot of people were probably more in that skeptical category. And I think that's probably a common response. I want to support this person, but I really want to see how they do it first, especially if they have never been in a major management role like that. That's how I think it was. There were a few people that were definitely probably not as positive about it as I wish they were. And there were a few people that maybe were overly positive, at least when I talked to them. Whether one caution on the cheerleaders, often to your face they may be positive, but not when you walk away. And you got to be cautious with that. The biggest thing that I saw, though, was that, and Samantha put it at the bottom of her slide on that, the people are not always in that same category. They're not always cheerleaders, always skeptics, always against you. Mm-hmm. They move between that team. It can be daily, it can be by issue. They're constantly shifting a little bit. And so you got to be aware that even though you think somebody's in a certain position, they do tend to drift a little bit. And I noticed that a lot, that depending, especially as I was trying to navigate the water, sometimes I'd make people happy, move them to the cheerleader. Sometimes you do something that wasn't as exciting, moves them down the ladder. But I think overall people tend to stay in that skeptical role quite a bit, and that's probably where the majority of the team tends to rest most of their time.
Great. Well, that's a really powerful response. Let's just take one more quickly. Sam, so when setting my agenda, should I be engaging my former peers? After all, I don't really know that much more than they do.
Absolutely. People who get to weigh in tend to buy in. And so one thing that you might do is, let's say you're selected to lead the team to launch a new initiative or to take a new direction. You can take that initiative to the team and say, we're going to block out a half day at a time. We're going to come in here, we're going to figure out how does this team this year accomplish this goal? Mm-hmm. And it's not about legislating from your mountaintop. It is about building a consensus and making sure you can hold everyone accountable to that, moving along, accomplishing incremental goals as you go, and at the end, execute on what that strategic vision is, and that's what your company as a whole will recognize, and it's what your team will find pride in.
Fantastic. So that will also help create some more cheerleaders, won't it?
Absolutely. We don't want all cheerleaders, though. We got to keep our feet on the ground, Dr. Shaver.
Good closing point. All right. So I think this has been a powerful presentation. I've taken a lot away and a lot of notes, a lot of things that I'll try to use. And so just remember, for everyone, it will happen to us, and we should remember a lot of what we've learned here today. So if you'll advance for us, Samantha, to the next slide, there we are. So I want to close by saying thank you, Tom, for giving us your personal view, and I'm sure we could all identify with some aspect of your experience. Your key learnings will surely help us take care of ourselves and others. And Thank you, Samantha, for sharing best practices for this transition from peer to supervisor of our peers. This kind of promotion is exciting, and the peer to supervisor situation, though, can take away from some of that excitement. But by following your summary points that you shared with us, we can enjoy the transition and hopefully get off to a great start. And so to the participants here today, I want to thank you for your interest and active participation in the webinar. Our next webinar in the ASTA Tri-Societies Leadership Series, Taking It to the Next Level, is Managing Conflict, led by Debbie Tucker from Bayer. This webinar will be held 1 month from today on March 15th at the same time, 2:00 p.m. Central Standard Time. And Debbie will bring us more great advice on interpersonal conflict and conflict within your team. So until then, I want to say thank you very much for participation today.
We'd like to thank the Tri-Societies and the American Seed Trade Association for sponsoring this seminar series. I think it's definitely a very good seminar and one that Samantha and I both look forward to seeing the rest of.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone.